Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Speaking of watches, while we're at I/O, one of their big initiatives, and we've already talked about it a little bit, is Android Wear. That's Google's wearable platform, wearable kind of side of Android for tiny little screens. And to drive the point home, they sent everybody home with their choice of either the Samsung Gear Live, which is the watch that I have right here. There you can see it on my wrist. And then Mike, you ended up with the LG G Watch, or the Gwatch as I like to call it.
That's right, the Gwatch is this one. They're very similar to each other, of course, because of Android Wear and because, as we talked about on Tech News Today this week, they don't let you modify, they don't let the OEMs modify it. So Android Wear is Android Wear. You can modify it sort of with apps by what you install, and there are subtle differences between what each of the watch manufacturers put on there, but for the most part, Android Wear has the same interface on all devices.
I think it makes actually a lot of sense when you're talking about wearables, because really a big part of wearing a watch, for example, is the style aspect, right? I trust, well, and you know, I guess I do a show about Android and about Google, so maybe this is a little bit of me rubbing out, it rubbing off on me, but I trust Google to give me a user experience that is going to work in this form factor. I trust manufacturers to give me a form factor that looks appealing. That's something that I like. So I suppose let's start there. Let's start with the watch itself, and then maybe we'll circle around at the end and talk a little bit about Wear as a platform. What can you tell me about the G Watch? Okay,
so right now the best way to think about both of these watches is to compare them against each other. So this particular watch is, again, very similar to the Samsung watch, although it's smaller and lighter a little bit. It's 1.8 by 1.5 by 0.39 inches, okay, 1.3 ounces, which is very light. It's almost an ounce lighter than the Samsung watch. It has a 9-axis sensor, so you notice that what happens is you see, if you look at this, if I put my hand over it, I put it to sleep, right? So you see how it's black and white, but if I put it down and then bring it back up, it lights up and it can accept commands when I say, "Okay, Google. What's the weather outside?"
And so it's tethered to your phone.
That's right. Now, every time I've demonstrated this to somebody, it has lost its connection.
And you are in the Twit studio, which is a land of 1,000 wireless interferences.
That's right. So there's another interesting feature about this, which people don't really, it's writing down everything that I'm saying here. I put it to sleep and then go back to zero. But you can actually use this without voice by simply tapping it. You get that, and then you can scroll down to the options. So I can basically choose one of these if I want to set a timer, start a stopwatch or whatever, show alarms. So I'll start a stopwatch, just choose that, and then go.
Oh, neat.
And so I didn't use my voice at all, even though it starts with the voice user interface.
Right.
So again, covering it, puts it to sleep. Now you see these other notifications and my timer's still going there. I can pause it with that. This is similar to the control for music and so on. So those are Android Wear things, not really related to the watch. So let's get back to the watch. Of course, it's Bluetooth tethered. It has a stronger battery. We talked about this on Tech News Today as well than the Samsung, but it's less, probably has worse battery life than the Samsung because the screen is more of a power hog.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Ars Technica just did a side-by-side, and it turns out that the LG G Watch performed a little better than the Samsung, which I would not have guessed.
That's right.
Considering the screens.
That's right. Now this probably gets somewhere, this is an estimate on my part, and this is not based on testing, but I would guess about somewhere between 18 hours to 36 hours of use, depending on whether you're a very heavy user or a very light user. And again, the screen is always on, so the time is always shown, either in bright mode or dimmed mode. So you can always just look at the watch and get the time, which is very nice.
That's kind of important too. Like I even saw it in the chat room. No one ever talks about the fact that you could tell time on these things.
Yeah.
That is, and I think these watches do that pretty effectively.
They do, and you can also change the watch face. So you can choose from among, and they have some, there's Peter Max, like 1972 kind of looking things. I don't see why anybody would choose that. To me, it's not very compelling. But yeah, it's a great watch. It's great for telling the time and so on. So back to the hardware here. This is you know, I would say that the pros of this particular watch compared to the Samsung, again, the only comparison we can make at this point, is that it's very comfortable. It's easy to charge. You just simply put it on top of a little cradle type thing. It doesn't actually plug in. It just sits on top of it, which is nice. It's water resistant. It's nearly an ounce lighter than the Gear Live, and it's even lighter than the Pebble watch, which probably does significantly less than an Android Wear watch does. Now, the cons compared to the Samsung are that it has no biometric sensors. Now, there's no heart rate monitor, nothing. There is a pedometer in there, but that's not a biometric sensor. It has poor sunlight readability. I guess they both do. It's square rather than round. Some of the better ones are going to be round, I would guess. So-so battery life, lower screen resolution, and it's less vibrant. The screen is less vibrant than the Samsung.
Sure.
Doesn't look quite as good. And it costs $30 more. So this is $229. And so those are the pros and cons of this particular watch, the LG G watch.
Okay, I'll run through the Gear Live, and then we can kind of give our try, buy, don't buy. So this is the Samsung Gear Live. It looks like, you know, it looks a lot like their recent kind of incarnation of Galaxy Gear watches for the most part, but this, of course, is running Android Wear. It's 1.2 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 400, 1.63-inch 320 by 320 AMOLED display. So that actually means that when it's in low power mode, all it's doing is lighting up these pixels. It's not blocking out the dark pixels. So in essence, that should be better for your battery life. This is what the Moto X does with active notifications. 4 gigs of storage on board, although right now it's kind of hard to think about how you'd fill up 4 gigs, but I'm sure at some point that will be a reality. And of course, 300 milliamp hour battery, which is a whole 100 milliamp hours less than the LG G watch. You can kind of see the design, right? Like it has the chrome edges, which I actually kind of like, although the design is a little chunky. You have to be okay with that. It actually works on my wrist. I would say that it feels super comfortable and not too overly large on my wrist. I don't feel like I'm wearing a weight when I'm wearing this, but I would imagine if you have smaller wrists, smaller hands, it might stick out just a little bit more. The one difference that this has over the G watch is that it does have a hardware button. It has this little power button. I never use it, but if you want to turn it on from an off state, you can. You can also hold it down and it'll pull up your settings menu eventually. There we go. Oh, I just backed away from it, but there you have it.